Stop everything and listen, because the last 48 hours may represent one of the most pivotal and dangerous moments yet in the long-running Epstein fallout. This is not a verdict. This is not a courtroom drama. This is something far more revealing. A pressure point. A breaking moment, a silent standoff between power and accountability that is now unfolding in full public view. What we are witnessing right now is being framed by political observers as a historic shift in momentum. Epstein's victims are once again demanding that Prince Andrew testify before lawmakers, and this time the silence feels louder, heavier, and more consequential than ever before. This does not feel like an old scandal being recycled. It feels like a system being tested and possibly exposed. Reports suggest that behind the scenes, this renewed push has sent shockwaves through political and institutional circles on both sides of the Atlantic. Media analysis indicates that this is no longer just about one man's past associations. It is about whether influence still functions as armor in an era where public tolerance for elite immunity is collapsing. Prince Andrew has denied wrongdoing. That is a matter of public record. He has previously settled a civil case without admitting liability. Legally, some argue that should have closed the chapter. But politically and psychologically, the chapter never closed. It merely went quiet. And quiet does not mean resolved. Now that quiet is breaking. Political observers believe the renewed demand for testimony represents something deeper than a legal request. It is a symbolic challenge, a demand that the same standards of transparency applied to ordinary citizens be applied to those who once operated far above consequence. And that is precisely why this moment is so volatile. Because testimony is not just about answers, it is about control. Once testimony happens, the narrative no longer belongs solely to advisors, lawyers, or institutions. It becomes part of the public record. It invites scrutiny. It invites follow-up. It creates a chain reaction that cannot be easily contained. And according to media interpretation, that is the risk powerful institutions fear most. So, the silence continues. And that silence is not neutral. Silence in moments like this becomes a strategy, a calculation, a belief that time will dull attention and exhaustion will replace outrage. But political analysts warn that this assumption may be dangerously outdated. The public reaction now is not explosive, it is focused, and that shift matters. We are no longer seeing chaotic outrage, we are seeing sustained pressure. And sustained pressure is what erodes defenses built on delay. Behind closed doors, reports suggest internal conversations are becoming increasingly tense. Advisors, officials, and institutional figures are believed to be weighing the cost of continued silence against the damage of engagement. And when those calculations begin to diverge, fractures form. This is how internal collapse starts, not with scandal, but with disagreement over how long the walls can hold. Media analysis points to a growing divide between those who believe silence still offers protection and those who fear it now signals guilt, avoidance, or arrogance. And once that perception takes root, reversing it becomes nearly impossible. There's also a psychological dimension that cannot be ignored. Political commentators often note that prolonged avoidance under public scrutiny tends to amplify suspicion rather than suppress it. Each refusal raises more questions than it answers. Each delay feeds narratives that institutions are afraid of what might come next. And the longer this goes on, the more the silence itself becomes the story. What are they afraid of being asked? What are they afraid of revealing? And who else might be implicated if the questions begin? These are not accusations. They are implications. And implications are often far more destabilizing than allegations. This moment also exposes a deeper crisis, one that extends beyond any single individual. It raises uncomfortable questions about how power operates in modern democracies. Who is compelled to explain themselves publicly, and who is allowed to decline? Who bears the burden of transparency, and who is insulated from it? Political observers increasingly frame this as not a royal issue, but a democratic one, a test of whether institutions still believe accountability is optional for the powerful, because when victims are asking to be heard and institutions respond with procedural silence, public trust erodes. And once trust erodes, legitimacy follows. According to media analysis, this erosion is already underway. Public reaction is shifting from shock to expectation. People are no longer asking whether powerful figures should be questioned. They're asking why they haven't been already. And that question cuts deeper than outrage ever could. This is where the internal political conflict becomes most visible, not in speeches or statements, but in hesitation, in careful wording, in strategic non-responses. Some political analysts believe this is the most dangerous phase for institutions under pressure because they are no longer responding to noise, they are responding to focus, and focus does not fade easily. The risks of doing nothing are mounting. History shows that unresolved scandals do not disappear. They resurfaced with greater force, often when institutions are least prepared to handle them. And when that happens, responses tend to be reactive rather than principled. According to observers, each day of silence now adds weight to the perception that something is being avoided, and perception in politics often matters as much as reality. This is not about proving guilt, it is about demonstrating willingness to face questions openly, about showing that no one is above scrutiny, even when scrutiny is uncomfortable. Refusal may be legally defensible, but politically it sends a message that institutions still believe they can wait this out, and that belief may be their greatest miscalculation. Because the broader context matters. We are living through a period where public tolerance for elite insulation is collapsing across the globe. From politics to finance to media, systems built on deference are being questioned in ways they have not been before. And the Epstein case has become a symbol of that reckoning, not because of what has been proven, but because of what remains unanswered. Political commentators stress that this moment is a choice point. Engage or retreat, clarify or obscure, address the questions or allow speculation to define the narrative. There is no neutral option anymore. The longer silence persists, the more it appears deliberate, and deliberate silence under pressure is rarely interpreted generously. This is why analysts describe the current moment as unstable, because it sits at the intersection of moral demand and institutional fear, and that intersection is where collapses often begin. So, pay attention, not to rumors, not to exaggerated claims, but to patterns. Watch who speaks. Watch who avoids speaking. Watch how institutions behave when pressure intensifies rather than fades. Because history rarely turns on single revelations. It turns on moments when power is challenged and reveals its true limits. This is one of those moments. Whether testimony happens or not, the consequences are already unfolding. The public is watching, the pressure is building, and silence is no longer invisible. This is not the end of the story, but it may be the moment when the balance shifted. And once that balance shifts, it is very difficult to shift it back.